So anyway, I thought that it was great. I could definitely talk about beauty. I'm a scientist, right? What I wanted to do is just make sure that, is this going? Okay. That you understand that anything that I say here today is just really a self-study. So I had to ask questions. I thought I would just be able to tell you what I think beauty is, and you should accept it. Isn't this pretty? And all this other stuff. And I realized it's not that easy. And so, firstly, do we even know what beauty is? Is there a definable definition for it? I'm sure probably if you look in the dictionary, there is a definable interpretation of what beauty is. But it seems a lot of times that it's very, very vague. Like they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, like it's subjective or something like that. That doesn't seem something that's a definable, measurable thing that I can talk about. And as a scientist, I like definable, measurable things that I can talk about, right? And so how do we recognize beauty? I had a couple of recent events that made me question how I interpret beauty. So not just through my lens, but maybe other people have different perspectives that I can't see, and that I become blind to beauty every day. And I'll talk a little bit about that maybe. And then whether or not, do we even need it? Is it something that we just see and observe and feel maybe? And then, what's the point of it in the first place? All right, so I'm gonna really try. Lots of questions. In science, I just diving into this. All right, so again, anything that I say is not 100% a right answer. This is just a thought experiment coming from my own mind, and I put some stuff on slides, all right? So just keep that in mind, all right? And then, of course, I'm a chemist. Specifically, I'm a physical chemist, which means I'm the least chemist of all the chemistries. I know that sounds really strange, but it's like lots of particles, and so how they interact with each other, things are just on a larger scale of things, all right? So, but how might we view beauty through the lens of science specifically? All right, so I'm gonna give you my personal definition. This took me a month to come up with this statement. I'm just telling you, it was deep dive, coming down to my own truth, all right? So it's big, and I'll tell you why it's big in a bit. But to me, beauty is an observation or experience so outstanding that it invokes a feeling of wonderment and awe so profound that it substantiates the existence of God. That's a Keenan quote. Okay, so I'm saying that's not small. When you look in the mirror and you're like, hey, I'm beautiful today, we will talk about that too. You are beautiful because you substantiate the existence of God. We'll talk about that. But anyway, big things, where does all this big come from? Man, why can't it just be I say, you can say something is pretty, or you have these other feelings of things, but to me, beauty is something that we experience on this plane of human life, and then we get this feeling that allows us to recognize something may be true, and then it connects us to God. Okay? So, something as big, I'm from Alaska. I was born and raised there. And probably a couple times this summer, came across some, nice people, and on vacation, and even here on campus. And they were like, oh yeah, you're from Alaska, that's so cool. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, for sure. And I'm talking about local events and stuff, homelessness is really an issue right now, and all these other things. And as these people, they're just they walked away, and I had not given them the insight that they maybe were expecting from meeting someone from Alaska who was born and raised there and has all this unique experience, right? So then I'm that's so cool. Is it so cool? Was it so cool? So lots of interesting things about Alaska, and I just need you to understand that I grew up there. I have no time in my earliest thought where I didn't see this big stuff, all right? So just for perspective, it's all the way over there, and now I'm all the way over here for Tennessee, and I lived in Germany, so I feel like I'm relatively well-traveled, all right? But in general, it's massive. And I don't need you, I'm not gonna talk about all the wonderful things of how big Alaska is. It really is freaking large, and most of the population is like so afraid of the bigness that we populate one city, which is my hometown. Alaska has probably 40% of the whole population of the state. Not joking, okay? Because it's that big, all right? On top of that, just something that I found that was quite interesting, the total number of miles of public roads is only 14,000 miles. Like, you're not driving far, okay? Compared to Tennessee, as a state, has 96,000 miles. And if you think Tennessee is rural, I mean, how do I tell you scale? How do I tell you the scale that I was brought up in and born with and exposed to, where we are somehow living in this kind of place where we're all huddled together, kind of in a little way, and we kind of go into nature hoping we don't get like mauled by a bear or whatever. I'm telling you, it's a valid threat, okay? In terms of just like the awesomeness of it, we know like it's definitely big, it has big things. So it's not just that the state itself is really, really large. And I know that you're not thinking to come to this talk and hear about Alaska, but this formed my framework of what beauty is. All right, so from that, like Iditarod, Susan Butcher, my favorite, musher, to this means nothing to you. It's awesome. People just, they're like surviving for over 1,000 miles on a dog sled. The dogs have to eat 1,200 calories per day just to make it. I know, it's not like UT basketball or anything like football or anything, but to us, it's cool. All right? Also, that's a moose right there in the middle. They're big. Apparently, they're part of the deer family. The weird thing about them is like they will destroy your car, and they seem like they can't move very fast, but they really can be speedy when you don't expect it. Do you know that moose can jump up to 6 feet high? They can leap about 10 feet long. So in the end, if you don't know that and you're like, there's a moose, I'm going to Alaska to visit, let's take a picture, be careful. Okay? But a moose, it can come out of anywhere. I still had to walk to the bus stop in the morning at 6:30 in the morning to make it to school in the snow. There are no snow days in Alaska. Okay? So again, just like this framework. Also, just one of those weird things I was thinking about and reflecting on. Anytime you go to the state fair, there's always a special place for the biggest cabbage. And lo and behold, yes, the current world record for the heaviest cabbage is 138 pounds from this guy named Scott out of Palmer, Alaska. I don't know if anybody eats it, but we like to see it. Every year we're gonna go to the state fair and we're gonna go see that freaking large cabbage. Why? Because, you have to realize that in certain regions of the state, you get up to 24-hour daylight in the summertime. That's odd to you, it is natural for me. Okay? So just weird, right? But what if weird is your normal? Lastly, Mount McKinley, we used to call it Mount McKinley, it's Denali National Park at this point, but it's like the highest mountain peak in North America. You can see it from Anchorage. It is there. So all of this big, and these are not even the biggest things, all of this big, all the time, forming in my consciousness. But I can't, somehow I can't convey that to other people, right? Because it's my normal. All right, so when I see any of these things, that looks real nice, look at those. I think that those are some mammal in the water with glaciers. As a local person, only for visitors, no one's gonna get you if your boat sinks. If you want to pay for that, go ahead and pay for that. We already have enough risk. We're not gonna go into Arctic waters. Looks pretty. We would just stay away, all right? The eagle, it's not even the state bird. The ptarmigan is a state bird. So they look all massive and large, but you know what I'm saying? The local perspective is not the same as this gloriousness of someone who is not necessarily exposed to it at all. In Fairbanks, you can see the aurora borealis about 4 times a week. Do you think that makes it the aurora? 4 times a week, guys. Weekly. You could just look up and see it anytime you want. So what does that do if you've never seen it before? You're like, oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. But then up close, when you see it all the time, you're like, yeah. All right? And also, just any bear is a dangerous bear. Like, you never want to take selfies with that at all, okay? One thing that you guys may not know, I know I'm just going on and on, is like earthquakes are like a natural phenomena. So if you're looking at this seismic map, we have to deal with volcanoes, ash, and earthquakes, which can trigger each other all the time. So on top of not really wanting to, like, do you want to go on a hike this weekend? Yeah. Like, what are you going to do if you have an earthquake? We've had one in 1964 that triggered a tsunami. It's the second largest on record. Collapsed parts of Anchorage where now you see a valley and a bridge. It used to be all one level. So that's a thing. And so between that, like, I know it sounds like I'm being pessimistic, but I was like, the Bible has to say something about this. And I came up with this one. But now ask the beast, and they will teach you, and the birds of the air, and they will tell you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, and the fish of the sea will explain to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this, in whose hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind? But yeah, I grew up with that. I have never doubted God's existence. Can you imagine that? I'm not just saying because, like, my parents took me to church. The vastness of my reality was so large, I could not deny him. But it's not the same. Sometimes we're looking for beauty, and it's very, very subtle, all right? And so then I got to this question, like, is it possible that in the day-to-day grind of life, we just don't have perspective, and we can't see the beauty that's right in front of us? So really, I'm like, okay, people have told me my whole life that my home place of birth is beautiful. Do I believe it? Weird, right? Just doesn't it? It's like a thought experiment. Oh, I'm just taking down the whole spiral. All right? So, and I propose that maybe beauty only seems vague because it's a reflection of God's truth. And sometimes when something is reflected, sometimes the reflection can be distorted. All right? And so what I do want to make clear is that beauty is not an indication of perfection at all. And I started just going into the scripture, and you guys know this one. This is a common one. Psalm 139, 14-16. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. But I was like going through some feeds this summer, and I heard something about, are you girl beautiful or boy beautiful? The fact that we can't even look in the mirror and see our own worth, and that we need someone else to tell us, oh, you look great today. You are beautiful today. Look at your talents. Look at how well you are. Look at who you are becoming. Know who you are. Know what you are in Christ. But we can't even see it because it's too close. We see ourselves every single day. And so we lose perspective. Okay, so do we even really need this beauty at all? Again, beauty is not perfection. And I would say, yes. If you're looking, most times we're like searching for this beauty, like those experiences, those observations that somehow, like those, why do we do that? Those really nice vacations, you know? Exploring new places. And I would say, yes, it is necessary because first, it reminds us of who we are, whose we are, who God is, and it is a vehicle to connect us to God. And that's why we search for it. Big, right? I'm sorry, I'm from Alaska. I'm used to big. All right? So, I said I was a physical chemist, right? So, despite all that stuff in my face all the time, it makes sense that I had to find another kind of beauty on a smaller scale. All right, I'm used to big. All right? So the question is, to me, really is beautiful, scalable. There are moments in life, just as an adult, like the birth of my child, that are so subtle and fleeting that I could tell you that that was one of the most beautiful moments of my life when I saw that she was like really a thing and she existed. I know you guys don't have that yet, so I can't really talk about that. But there are subtleties, right? Things that are very subtle that are not necessarily in your face, like Mount McKinley or a majestic bird or a plain state or, I don't know, glaciers or something that's awe-inspiring. There's awe in the small, okay? And so I just purposefully did not give any equations here, but I'm a physical chemist, so I really like equations, but I did not put any here just for you, okay? But I do want to remind you of what beauty is to me. Again, it's an observation or experience so outstanding that invokes a feeling of wonderment and awe so profound that it substantiates the existence of God. So, scientific method, guys, come on, this is pretty beautiful. To me, like, why? You guys have probably been exposed to this theory or like progression in grade school. I'm not going to go over it in detail, but I'll tell you the highlights of why I think it's beautiful. It's because of this, like, do you see that red arrow there? It's that circle part. So as someone who's gotten their PhD in a scientific field, after 3 to 5 years, sometimes 6, of research, you think that, you are a mini expert in your field, whatever that very narrow field is. And then you're like, I've got it, I published this is truth. Yeah, confidence. And then, like 6 months later, someone else comes along and they have a better method of measurement, or technology comes along that gives you more information, and then you're like, you are then a footnote on a citation of someone else's paper. And you have to be okay with that. There is no right, there's no full truth. We are just going toward truth. So there is, to me, nothing that is, science is not anti-Christianity. It is just a way to be able to understand God's creation and to refine it so maybe we can help people or understand things a little bit better and see his beauty a little bit better. All right? So, that's the periodic table. I guess knew I had to put that up in there. Periodic table. The fact that carbon, atomic number 6, is definitely different than nitrogen, atomic number 7. The only thing that is on a small level different between those two guys is one particle, and it's a proton, and it is so small. Do you know that it is possible for a carbon to turn into a nitrogen, specifically carbon-14 to nitrogen-14, but it takes about at least half your sample, it's called the half-life, about 5,700 years to be able to do that naturally. So why can't we just put another proton there ourselves? Why can't we just make it ourselves? Do you know that the natural form, elemental form for nitrogen has to be bound to itself? It's nitrogen gas. For carbon, the natural form, elemental form for it is really boring. It's graphite. But the cool thing is graphite, like in your pencil, can be turned to diamond under high pressure and temperature conditions. Cool. That's like nitrogen is interesting. It's a gas. But graphite to diamond, that's cooler. And the whole thing is one particle. Why can't we just do that? Why can't we just make whatever we want? We are not just, we can, and we have. All right, so do you see those yellow elements right there? Those are artificial elements. We have proved that they exist because we have made them as humans. All right, one of the ones is tennessine. It's a synthetic, super heavy element. Do you guys know that it looks like Tennessee? Why? Because it was developed in cohort with a Russian lab with ORNL, Oak Ridge National Labs. All right, and so what they did is they took two elements, a lighter one and a heavier one, and they bombarded one with the other. All right, like massive amount of energy in a nuclear reactor with fusion. So we did it. We saw that 6 particles existed for a fraction of a second. And then that's what we got. Do you know what I'm saying? So to me, this is beautiful because it reminds me of like all of the stuff that I saw when I was growing up. All the scale business. It doesn't really matter, even on the atomic level. Some of this stuff is still so awesome and wondrous that it connects me to God. I'm just seeing a little sliver of that. All right? Another weird stuff, the quantum mechanics. It falls under chemistry. It falls specifically under physical chemistry, but also it's the physics part of that. It's the weird. I'm just going to tell you, like, go look it up. It's strange. All of it's strange. It defies human comprehension. And we're trying to like understand it. But one cool thing is wave-particle duality. You can have a substance that exhibits properties like that has mass and exhibit particle behavior, and it can also behave as a wave. The thing is, you don't know which one you're going to get until you start measuring it. And to me, this is like, oh, if we already know that there's one entity that can have dual properties, why can't we believe that God is trifold and has three parts of himself? We just need more measurement. Maybe there's something else. Maybe we'll figure out that we've got some unknown thing which probably tethers us, and particles can be trifold. I'm just saying. Possibilities. All right, also, quantum entanglement, it's super strange. It's when two subatomic particles are linked in such a way that they can communicate without any form of actual communication. It's like twinsies, you know what I mean? Like, oh, my twin is in trouble. And it doesn't matter how far away your twin is from you, that you're just kind of like that weird feeling. You guys you've heard about that before. I don't know if it's a real thing, but I'm just saying it's kind of like twinsies. So it doesn't really matter. So one cool thing is that they took two coupled spins and they launched one into space. And whatever happened to this spin, the other one knew it. And then whatever happened to that spin, the other guy knew it. Weird. Check it out. Okay? I'm just saying, I had to. All right, my favorite element on the whole periodic table is xenon, specifically xenon 129, because it is MRI active, which means nothing to you, but it's super cool. All right, so what happens is like, it is in its natural state a gas molecule that's just like a sphere like that. It's not even bound to anything. It seems so boring. But that inability to like, it's not that it can't make compounds, it can, but naturally it doesn't need to. It's pretty stable all by itself. But it's like, what's really interesting is that you can take something that is highly reactive, shine it with some sort of laser, excite those electrons on the rubidium specifically, and then just like at high temperature, pressure, moderate pressure, these things can collide in the gas phase, and their interaction is so small. It's like on the time scale of a millisecond, it's barely there. These are popping and colliding, these molecules are colliding so fast. But that energy from the rubidium can transfer over to the xenon and then transfer electrical energy and turn it into nuclear energy in a way, this momentum on the xenon, which means the xenon that used to be so boring can be used for additional experiments that you wouldn't have been able to do without it. So for example, your lungs have very little water, otherwise you'd be drowning. Okay, so you're like breathing in oxygen all the time. There's a bit of moisture up in there, but it's really not good for conventional MRI because conventional MRI is looking at proton. Proton is useful because you have a lot of water in your body. It's not so useful to give you any form of picture that's in your lungs, for example, because there's not a whole lot of water there. So for example, what you can do is you can hyperpolarize the xenon, and then you can mix it with a little bit of oxygen, enough to sustain life, and have a patient inhale it. And then it's like you're not even limited by things that are bound to each other anymore. You're looking at that free phase xenon diffusing through healthy tissue or not diffusing through tissue at all. And so you can map through MRI by looking at the xenon 129, something that looks like a normal, healthy lung, and those regions of lung that are not fully getting ventilated properly through disease. Something that you would not be able to see if you could not manipulate this stuff externally. That's beautiful to me. Okay? So anyway, just summary, I do believe that beauty is all around us and reflects God's truth. It can be found in all things, small and large. We search for it because we have an inherent need to connect to God. and it is a manifestation of his goodness and his promises to us. So really the main issue here is like, do I believe that Alaska is beautiful? So anyway, I was a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and I was like, yeah, look at those mountains. So I've always wanted on my bucket list, like if I wanted to go anywhere, New Zealand was it. Like I have very few places I really want to go. And then I took some genealogy test or whatever, and like, you know, there's some Viking up in me or something like that. So I'm like, definitely want to go to Norway. And then I'm like, Google pictures, and I'm like, yeah, that's super cool. Norway, yeah. And then I'm like, oh man. Yeah, so I guess even despite what everyone tells me, I gotta think, I really do believe Alaska is really, really beautiful as well. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And you are dismissed.